The United States is a nation with a long and colorful history of racial tension, and the current state of the country demonstrates how the source of racial discrimination in America has yet to be addressed. African Americans, along with other minorities, have faced a wide range of hardship throughout our country's history, and the institutional oppression created by our current social system only worsens this problem. Many public and political figures and officials have touched on the problem. However, they are only scratching the surface of the systematic discrimination in the so-called land of the free.
And the land of the free is full of freeloaders. Leave us dead in the street to be the organ donors. They disorganized my people, made us all loners. Still got the last names of our slave owners.
The critically acclaimed rapper, Joey Badass, uses his own medium of music to convey his duty to battle and protest the fraudulency in post-Jim Crow society and its negative effect on minorities, as well as steps toward policy. Jim Crow law are any of the laws passed that enforce racial segregation from the end of Reconstruction and slavery all the way through the Civil Rights Movement until 1968. The laws were put in place in an attempt to return the southern states' social structure to the antebellum period, pre-Civil War, by marginalizing black Americans. They put black citizens into indentured servitude and took voting rights away. Laws controlled where people of color lived, how they traveled, and aimed to seize children for labor purposes. Defiance to laws resulted in violence and death. The legal system was stacked against black citizens, with ex-Confederate soldiers working as police and judges, making it difficult for African Americans to win court cases and ensuring they stayed victim to inequality. Clauses and predispositions in the legislature created loopholes that exempted European Americans from these grueling consequences. The Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s eliminated many Jim Crow laws. However, corrupt politics, along with a lingering segregated ideology throughout America, allowed unjust and discriminatory policies to continue to emerge into the late 20th century.
This statement, which I think needs to be made to the nation. America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
We intend to end the drug menace and to eliminate this dark, evil enemy within.
Put them away where they belong.
3 strikes and you are out.
It's an all-out offensive against crime, against narcotics, against permissiveness in our country.
The rhetoric of get tough and law and order was part and parcel of the backlash of the civil rights movement.
Nixon administration official has admitted that the war on drugs is all about throwing black people in jail. He said, quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Extraordinary numbers of people are in prison because of drugs, yet it is not a place to get drug treatment. They come out, and then we're surprised that we have the highest recidivism rates. And that results in this cycle of incarceration and overcrowding.
Drugs. Because half the people in federal prison are there on drug charges, and it accounts for a quarter of admissions to state prisons. And of course, it's tricky to know how to feel about all this, because on the one hand, the war on drugs has completely solved our nation's drug problem, so that's good. But on the other hand, our drug laws do seem to be a little draconian and a lot racist. Because while white people and African Americans use drugs about the same amount, a study has found that African Americans have been sent to prison for drug offences at up to 10 times the rate, for some utterly known reason.
The declaration of the war on drugs was a turning point in race relations in U.S. history. The Nixon and Reagan administrations used this motto to disguise legislature, which law enforcement targeted minorities with, as nationwide drug laws and policies. They dramatically increased the size and presence of federal drug control agencies and created more rigid and severe punishments for these crimes, such as longer and mandatory sentencing for drug use. The disenfranchisement of minority groups in the United States has established a sense of white privilege in the supposedly post-racial society, and the systematic discrimination is rooted in the social constructs and government policies created through the 20th century. African Americans, Latinos, Muslims, and any other minority have experienced unfathomable hardships throughout recent decades, and these hardships are often suppressed or ignored by the white majority of America. As racial tensions continue to rise, now is the time for the American public to reevaluate their alleged commitment towards racial equality and address the systematic discrimination throughout our society in order to obtain true racial equality for our future generations.